Welcome to Dark Side of History channel, where the untold stories of the past come to life. So don't forget to subscribe and uncover the mysteries with us.
Russian tank rescue American uniform. A Russian refugee received an American uniform to fight alongside the 10th Armored Division in 1945 after being rescued from a damaged tank. This international cooperation showed how the war brought together fighters from many nations against fascism and tyranny. The uniform exchange represented the alliance between different countries united in their determination to defeat Nazi Germany. Mount Suribaki pre-flag-raising moment. A photographer captured the tense moments before the famous Iwo Jima flag-raising on Mount Suribaki in 1945. This preparatory scene showed the dangerous conditions that Marines faced while securing the strategic high ground on the volcanic island. The pre-flag moment represented the intense fighting that preceded one of World War II's most iconic photographs. German tank destroyer victory marks. A tank destroyer crew marked each enemy tank they destroyed with white paint on their gun barrel, keeping score of battlefield victories. This practice boosted morale and provided recognition for successful crews who knocked out Soviet armor on the Eastern Front. The victory marks represented how soldiers found ways to measure success and maintain fighting spirit during brutal armored warfare. D-Day British beach landing operations. British and Irish troops stormed the Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944, beginning the liberation of Nazi-occupied Europe. This massive amphibious invasion required incredible courage from soldiers who faced heavy German defensive fire while establishing the crucial beachhead. The beach landing represented the turning point when Allied forces finally opened the Second Front in Western Europe. British Royal Signal's Hitler mockery. Royal Signal's troops mocked Hitler's dramatic gestures in October 1939, using humor as psychological warfare against the Nazi regime. These British troops demonstrated their contempt for Nazi leadership while maintaining morale through comedy and ridicule. The Hitler mockery showed how Allied forces used humor and propaganda to counter Nazi intimidation and boost fighting spirit. K-12 railway gun, French coast. The massive 33-meter barrel, 300-ton K-12 railway gun fired toward the English Channel from Nazi-occupied French territory. This enormous weapon represented German attempts to use super-heavy artillery to control the channel and threaten British coastal positions. The railway gun showed how Germany developed extreme weapons technology while lacking the strategic vision to use them effectively. SS Munich Midnight Oath Ceremony. A midnight ritual at the Feldherrnhalle in Munich strengthened SS power through dramatic ceremonies honoring the Nazi Führer in 1938. This theatrical oath-taking bound SS members to Hitler through solemn vows and ritualistic displays of absolute loyalty. The midnight ceremony represented how the Nazi regime used dramatic rituals to create fanatical devotion among its elite forces. John Marvin Steele Church Tower Landing. Paratrooper John Marvin Steele fell atop St. Mary-Église church tower during the D-Day invasion, becoming trapped. This dramatic landing showed the chaos and unpredictability of airborne operations during the largest amphibious invasion in history. The church tower landing represented both the dangers faced by paratroopers and the courage required for the Normandy invasion. Nazi SS officer survivor identification. A Russian concentration camp survivor identified a brutal SS guard seeking justice for the terrible crimes committed during the Holocaust. This identification process was part of efforts to bring Nazi war criminals to justice after the camps were liberated. The survivor testimony represented the courage of Holocaust victims who faced their tormentors to ensure justice was served. Russian veteran tank monument discovery. An elderly Russian veteran found his old wartime tank, now displayed as a memorial in a small Russian town decades later. This emotional reunion connected the veteran with his military service and the machine that helped him survive brutal Eastern Front battles. The monument discovery represented how veterans maintained connections with their service and honored fallen comrades throughout their lives. Hiro Onoda, Philippine Jungle Surrender. Japanese soldier Hiro Onoda emerged from 30 years of jungle hiding to surrender to President Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines. This dedicated soldier had continued fighting a war that ended decades earlier because he refused to believe Japan had surrendered. The jungle surrender represented the extreme dedication and loyalty of Japanese soldiers who would rather die than admit defeat. Hitler's final photograph before death. The last photograph of Adolf Hitler was taken on March 20, 1945, just 1 month before the Nazi dictator's death in his Berlin bunker. This haunting image showed Hitler as a broken man facing inevitable defeat and the collapse of his evil empire. The final photograph captured Hitler's physical and mental deterioration as his 1,000-year Reich crumbled after only 12 years. British gas mask onion preparation. British soldiers wore gas masks while peeling onions during the Siege of Tobruk in October 1941, showing how simple tasks became challenging during wartime. This humorous scene demonstrated how troops adapted to difficult conditions while maintaining their sense of humor during prolonged siege warfare. The gas mask cooking represented the practical problems soldiers faced while under constant threat of chemical weapons. German Smolensk supply depot capture. Wehrmacht troops captured Soviet Army supply depots with equipment still loaded on delivery trains during the advance on Smolensk in 1941. This successful capture provided German forces with desperately needed supplies while depriving Soviet defenders of essential equipment. The capture depot showed how rapid German advances in the early stages of Operation Barbarossa overwhelmed Soviet defensive preparations. STG-44 Prut River Defense Position. German troops defended the Prut River against Soviet attacks using revolutionary STG-44 assault rifles, the world's first operational assault weapons. These advanced firearms gave German infantry significant firepower advantages during defensive operations in the final stages of the war. The river defense represented how Germany technologically innovated even as their strategic situation became hopeless. German Berlin battle Reichstag rest. A German soldier rested during combat in Berlin with the destroyed Reichstag visible in the background during April 1945. This exhausted defender represented the last remnants of Nazi resistance fighting as the German capital fell to Soviet forces. The Reichstag rest showed how some German soldiers continued fighting even when defeat was inevitable and their cause was lost. French wine liberation celebration. A Coutances resident offered wine to an American machine gunner during the July 1944 liberation of the French town. This gesture of gratitude showed how French civilians welcomed their American liberators with joy and appreciation after years of Nazi occupation. The wine offering represented the friendship between Allied soldiers and liberated civilians who celebrated freedom together. Stalingrad cat building ruins discovery. Soviet soldiers found a cat surviving in building ruins during the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942. This touching scene provided brief relief from the brutal fighting that determined the fate of Nazi Germany on the Eastern Front. The cat discovery represented how life and compassion could survive even during the war's most devastating and destructive battles. Luftwaffe aces Hitler-Berghof meeting. Elite German pilots received awards from Hitler during a ceremony at the Berghof in 1944, representing Nazi recognition of aerial combat achievements. These ace pilots had achieved significant victory records but were fighting a losing battle against overwhelming Allied air superiority. The award ceremony showed how Nazi leadership tried to maintain morale even as the war situation became desperate. German POW wife reunion promise. A German soldier reunited with his wife after prisoner of war experience, promising to help rebuild their country after defeat in 1945. This emotional reunion represented the hope for peaceful reconstruction after years of devastating warfare and destruction. The POW return showed how families were reunited after the war ended and began the long process of rebuilding their lives. Elderly woman war devastation shock. American soldiers passed a civilian woman who seemed unable to believe the complete devastation that surrounded her war-torn community. This tragic scene showed how ordinary people struggled to comprehend the scale of destruction that modern warfare had brought to their homes. The civilian shock represented the innocent victims of war, who lost everything through no fault of their own. Henkel bomber funeral ritual ceremony. Luftwaffe crews at Tatsensky Airport performed symbolic burial rituals before dangerous combat missions in 1942.